In the previous lesson, we looked at how easy it is to create a simple JavaScript function. In this lesson, we're going to start expanding on that, talking about how we can actually add script tags linked to a JavaScript file, placing JavaScript within our web page, talk more about JavaScript syntax, comments in JavaScript, how semicolons work, and how white space works. And in the last lesson, the previous lesson, we had looked at all the different ways that you can write JavaScript. And I'm sure you have some application on your computer right now that you can open up in order to write some JavaScript. So whether you're using a Mac or Windows machine, you more than likely do have the tools to get going and start writing some code. And of course, if you don't, or if you can't find anything on your computer, you can always go to CodePen and practice the code and try out JavaScript for yourself. And I do encourage you to check this out and just to try to write some simple JavaScript. Another thing that you can do as well is go over to any web page, open up and view the source of the web page, go through any of these JS files, take a look at that, and just try to get more comfortable with the possibility and what can be done with JavaScript, how we can bring JavaScript into our web pages. So a lot of web pages, you probably find that some of this JavaScript code, it's very complex, and I don't want that to scare you off because it's really not going to be as complex as it looks. And as we go through all the different functionality, you're going to find that there are certain pieces of JavaScript code that are going to be repetitive and used over and over again, and those syntax we're going to be covering through within this course. So we're going to be covering all the commonly used syntax and how to use that within your web pages. So let's open up our editor, so whatever editor that you're comfortable with, and let's add in some JavaScript. So the first thing that we want to do is we noticed that we had the ability to simply open up that alert within CodePen. Now there's a number of ways that we can bring that same alert into our web page. So one of the ways that I'm going to do it is I'm just going to do it within my HTML. So yes, we can actually place JavaScript directly within our HTML, and we can do it with these built-in functions, which of course we're going to cover in more detail as we progress through the course. So this is simply going to open up that same alert function that we used in the last lesson, and I'm just going to close this one off with a semicolon. So you're going to notice that all the JavaScript lines of code, they're going to get closed off with a semicolon, and that's what JavaScript uses in order to separate out all the different commands. So if I had more than one alert, I could have multiple alerts here, and I could separate them via semicolon. And that's just really how easy it is to start applying JavaScript. And of course, we need to have some HTML here that maybe says something like click me or something like that. And I'm going to simply save that. And we're going to open up that same web page in our editor and refresh it. And now we should have a button or a div here that says click me, and as soon as we click it, we see that we fire off and we trigger off that JavaScript functionality. So there we go, we've got that same functionality and we've added it in line into our HTML code. Now this might not be the best way to apply JavaScript, because there are, just like with CSS, if you're familiar with CSS, there's multiple ways to add CSS. So we can do it similar to the way that we added JavaScript, where we can do it as an attribute here within the element, and we could do something like this on click. The other way to add JavaScript is going to be to actually add script tags within your source code. And the way that you do that, it looks similar to any other element in HTML where you've got your opening and closing tags, and then you've got your content in between there. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to add a second div here, give it an ID of btn2, and I'm going to call to it from the script tags. So I've given it an ID of 2, and of course we're going to talk more about this in more detail. So I'm just going to simply show you how we can add an event click event and then fire off that event as well. And we're going to be looking at this in more detail as we progress through the course. But for now, what I'm doing is I'm using some JavaScript and I'm selecting that particular element via the ID. So just as this function name indicates, get element by ID. And of course, we are going to look through this in more detail as we do progress through the course. So this was just to illustrate that we can do the exact same thing as we did before with this on click, but we can do it within our script tags. And this is a better way to add in JavaScript because this gives you the ability to really fine-tune where your JavaScript is going to get listed out. And I'm just adding in an event listener here. So this is another thing that we're going to cover off in more detail as we do progress through the course. So I'm just adding an event listener, and it's going to essentially fire off the same way as the on click. And then the function, of course, and then in between here, I'm going to type in that same alert. And I'll give it something like hello too. So I know what you're probably thinking, well, this looks like a whole lot more code to do something that we were already able to do over here. But let's try this out, and then after we're going to get into more of the details about why we do it this way, why this way is actually preferred over that way. So opening up our browser, going to refresh it. So now I've got two click me. I should have put maybe click me one there to differentiate those. But now I'm just going to click that first one. So that first one still fires off that hello. But the second one, now we fire off that hello too. So essentially they're doing the same thing, but we have separated out that code into more of a manageable type of a format where we're adding an event listener instead of adding it inline. And the benefit of doing it this way is because when you're developing code, it's always a good idea to try to separate it out as much as possible. So instead of having everything in one within your HTML code, and when you go back and you look at it at a later time, it might be a lot more confusing where you'd be looking at it and wondering, well, if you had to make some quick changes to button 1, and you'd have to literally go through all your HTML in order to find that JavaScript that would be hidden. As opposed to if you've got it within your script tags, then you could really easily find out, okay, well, this is the JavaScript, I know where I need to make my update, and I don't have to filter through a bunch of HTML. So to this point, there's another step further that you can go, and that's actually linking out to a JavaScript file. And this is going to work the same way as the original one worked, where we've got this, we're selecting the element, but we're just going to simply link out to a file. And the way that we do that is we do script, we enter in source, and we link to the file name. So the source is going to be whatever the file name is, and then we just close off that script tag. So we've opened it up and we've closed it off. And because I've already created script.js, which is sitting just over here, I can simply take this information, copy it in. All I need to do is make a change here on the name of the element that I'm trying to select. So I'm selecting this one, save this one as well. And now let's open up our browser and we'll show you how this works out. Actually, I should change this as well. So now when we open up our browser, we see we've got click me 1, 2, and 3. And when I click number 3, then it fires off that alert from the script.js file that's linked within our within our web code. So in the next lesson, we're going to be looking at even more detail about how we can add in really cool stuff with JavaScript, and we're going to be looking at the fundamentals of JavaScript, which are going to be setting up variables and also how we can communicate. And besides the alert, we're also going to look at prompt and how we can actually pick up information that the user sends through. So much like the alert, but we're going to be able to actually get some information and some actual information back from the user. So all of that is coming up in the next set of lessons.